We've created a world that doesn't coexist with our own biology. When we really believe that faster is better and profit over people and all of these things, what we're doing is we're literally saying we are not in the equation. And I'm really thinking that the only way we can move forward in an effective way is by up-leveling our consciousness so that we're operating at like upgrading the human software so that we can function in the world we have created.
Thanks so much for joining me today, man. I can't believe we're finally doing this after 2 aborted attempts due to tech issues.
Third time's a charm. We're going to make it happen.
We are going to make it happen. I'm super excited to talk to you. And again, I really appreciate that you're taking your time to do this. Hi, Mark Devine here from SealFit. After 2 years of development, I'm super stoked to announce the launch of SealFit supplements and our first product, SealFit Electro Greens. This is the highest quality organic greens you can find, combined with electrolytes into one powerful supplement. Take with 8 ounces of water in the morning or add to your smoothie to get your day kicked off right with the proper nutritional supplementation and hydration support. And you can also use it as a pick-me-up booster during the day or after a workout. It dissolves immediately, and believe it or not, it tastes great. I've had many testimonials already saying it's the best tasting greens that they have ever tried. So hoo-yah, SealFitSupplements.com, or you can find it on Amazon by searching for SealFit Electro Greens. Hoo-yah. Let's do this. Divine out. That is delicious. We have a lot to talk about. I know your expertise is in burnout and also relationships and having difficult conversations. These are really, really important topics. But let's talk about you and your life first. I always kind of start with what's the origin story? Where did you come from? And what set you on this path? Because usually, it's some sort of life crisis or some issue that you have to really, really, really focus on to solve. Yeah. That then gives you kind of an expertise and a passion to help others people. So what's your story?
Mark, I love that you start with the blueprint of our lives, the thing that lays out everything else, even if we don't know it.
Well, it's fun to think about too, because not everyone's so in the moment, charging forward. They don't often look back and contextualize how they got where they are and look at all the really cool things that happened, including those challenges, right? That taught you who you really were.
Well, I think of it even in becoming a Navy SEAL. I think of it even, I'm an engineer. I'm an internal medicine physician. These things don't happen by chance.
Right.
They happen because as young children, things happen that have us start achieving. And, in the end, we figure out what will have society approve of us, revere us, need us. Right. And so,
hopefully those are the right things instead of just more money, Well,
you know what? You shift gears when you figure out that it's not. Exactly. Or you figure out that the thing you thought you were going to get by all that achievement, it isn't there. And so then it becomes the next endeavor. So I am a middle daughter of 3 and of immigrant parents who, believe it or not, had an arranged marriage and came over from India in 1965.
65. I was 2 years old. Woo-hoo.
Yeah.
I missed him. Didn't get to meet him at the time.
And so they came here for an education. They fell in love with America and they decided to stay. And so we were all born and raised in Michigan. And I was sent away early in my life to live with my grandparents because something in the Indian culture that's really unique is that we hand kids around to the extended family. They don't think, 2 parents can raise a kid on their own or a family on their own.
Really interesting.
And so my grandfather got stationed in Africa with the United Nations for a few years, and he wanted my grandmother to come with him. Well, my grandmother was helping my mom raise me and my sister. And so I don't know how they decided all of this. I was 3 months old. My grandmother picked me up and took me with her, and my other sister stayed. Well, 2 years later, when I returned, yes, I was really bonded to my grandparents, but I came into an environment where my older sister was like, I don't want to share the love with my parents. What are you doing here? Right. And I thought I was an only child because I'm 2 years old and I've gotten all the love and attention. So bullying started early. Let's just say that. And let's also say that I wouldn't stop crying for more than a month. Wow. Hoping that I could see who I thought were my parents again.
Your grandparents.
So my grandparents, right? And so very quickly after a month of that, I reoriented like we all do when we're little and we're in situations that don't serve us.
Survival, right?
Survival. I became the biggest people pleaser. I could scan any environment and tell you what everybody wanted from me, and I was going to give it to them because please don't ever send me away again. And here's the other kicker. I checked out of my body. I decided that the pain I felt in this body wasn't going to go away. So I moved up into my head. And when I realized that the Indian community wanted math, science, education, athletics,
Perfect.
I was like, oh, that's all you need? If we do that, I'll be indispensable. So my dad wanted a son who was an engineer. Couldn't do the son thing for him, but I went into mechanical and biomedical engineering. My mom said she missed her calling as a doctor. I said, hey, no one needs to fight. I can do both. They're not mutually exclusive. And at the end of it all, I was 31 years old and hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, given up my 20s and my youth.
Right.
And my parents sat me down and said, okay, when are you going to get married and have kids? And that was the moment I realized that this game never ends when you play it for other people.
That's right. Everything you'd done up to them was for them, or for a perception of trying to please them, to fill that primordial wound of separation from
and it wasn't going to end. It wasn't enough.
End.
If engineering and medicine weren't enough, and now you're going to want grandchildren.
Now it's the perfect marriage, and then it's going to be the perfect kids, and then they have to do the perfect thing. Yeah, it's
and so when I realized that, I thought, no, like now I better do the hard work of figuring out who am I and what do I value. And this was much, much harder. Stop blaming them for making me do it. I was the one who applied to the schools. I'm the one who did the 36-hour shifts. I'm the one who took the tests. I obviously wanted something from this as well. And I figured it out in my 30s, which was I wanted the unconditional love and reverence of the Indian community, of my grandparents, of my parents. I wanted people to need me so I'd never be sent away.
You belonged.
Yes.
And I could see that. Interesting also. I mean, there is somewhat of a, maybe trauma is too strong of a word, but your origin culture is Indian, and yet you're parked in the middle of Michigan. Right? Michigan. Like it doesn't get any whiter than that. So you want to belong to your culture. And so you're going to do everything you can to get this.
And I just want to say a little bit about trauma here, right? There's big T trauma, which is like something awful happened to me. I got in an accident. I was abused on some level. And then there's little T trauma, which is my needs weren't met as a child. If someone is like the fourth child out of 4 and nobody really got excited about their drawings or their awards or their whatever, to me, when I think of trauma, I think of it as anytime I have perceived helplessness, where I needed something and my needs didn't get met, or something big happened and, it was a big separation. So that month that I was crying definitely was trauma for me, because it was no matter how much I cried, I wasn't going to get to be with my grandparents. So there was a need and a perceived helplessness that no matter how much I expressed myself wasn't going to change.
I totally love that. I know we're just semantics, but when you're a child, that's a big T trauma. Right?
Oh, huge.
It's only as an adult you can look back and say, oh, that's just a little T trauma. No, those are the traumas that you drag throughout your life, like dragging a bunch of kettlebells behind you, kettlebells. And we need to address them and heal them, because those end up informing the big T traumas of our later life, right? Those are what show up as the health crisis or the burnout, right?
Yeah. And if you don't do it, what happens is you just keep learning the same lesson over and over again. Right. So like in relationship, you show up and it's like, this time it's Julie. Oh, wow. It's the same pattern, except it's Karen, right? Like, or whatever it is, when you start having the same patterns in life with different names, it like your boss, you don't like your boss. And then suddenly you have another micromanaging boss. Whenever you start to see these patterns, it's from something that is still unhealed.
That's right.
So this is an interesting thing that I think leaders will enjoy, which is when I work with teams, executives, etc., and I notice the angst in cultures. When I'm coaching someone and they are having trouble with their peers, that's where the discord is coming in, or they're having trouble with their boss, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can usually trace it back to patterns with their siblings, if it's
Mm-hmm.
peer,
Mm-hmm.
or authority figures, if it is their boss.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's an interesting
Mm-hmm.
pattern that comes up often in my corporate work.
Mm-hmm.
That people, of course, they're like, is this therapy? Why are you talking about this? And I say, listen, you may have a thought around, quote, therapy that, oh, that's touchy feely. But what I want you to know is the way you're showing up as a leader today
Mm-hmm.
is as tied to your childhood blueprint as what you're wearing today is tied to what's in your wardrobe at home.
I love that.
Because
It's so true.
it's what you're
The
selecting
chat.
from.
Yeah, you're a doctor and you work with energetics, so we can kind of characterize it this way: like, that blueprint creates the energy system of your body, right? It's
Mhm.
going to create how your consciousness essentially is expressing the vibrational quality. Is it locked in kind of fear and lack and shame and guilt? Well, that has a certain vibrational quality
That's right.
which you're putting out there. You're emitting, and it becomes like a magnet. It attracts the same back to you, because this universe is really a projection of our consciousness. So we get reflected back what we put out. And so that's why, you said the energy of the relationship I had with my siblings, if there was bullying involved or something, well, guess what? You're putting that out there even though you don't want it. And guess what? Bullying is going to happen to you in the form of some
That's right.
narcissist, beating you up, not necessarily physically, but,
Emotionally,
in a demanding,
oftentimes.
emotional kind of narcissistic way. Or
And you know what? In my world as in healthcare in the hospital, I opened my first book, which is called Talk RX. I open it with me getting bullied by a colleague.
mm-hmm.
And that being the trigger to me understanding, going back to solve that, understanding how I contribute to showing up. Like I won't say anything and
Right.
I won't, I'm trying to work around it.
All
So
of
I
which
never
empowers the narcissist
other
bully.
person.
Right.
You bet. They know that they
Interesting.
can bully you.
Right.
So, yeah, there's no mistake why I wrote a book on healthy conflict and why I wrote a book on burnout, because I had to learn them,
Right. So in your 30s, you started to have this kind of wake up call that you were living, the stories of your parents and your surrogates, who are your grandparents,
Yeah.
and this blueprint you talk about. What was happening to you in your like life circumstances? What was the critical moment? Was there a critical moment where you just hit a wall, or you had to
Mhm.
change things entirely?
Yeah, I'd say when I was 30 years old, I got to do an elective in my
Mhm.
final year of residency. And so I went to Australia to work with the flying doctors. They
Oh,
work with the
cool.
Aboriginal,
They learn how
learn
to fly.
Aboriginal learn Aboriginal medicine and how you take care of people when you can't actually be there. So I
Right.
wish I would have gotten to fly in. No, I didn't. And I went to my first consciousness and self-awareness retreat in the rainforest on the Gold Coast. And
Wow,
I remember
what
the
fun.
opening, there were 27 Aussies and me, and there was a stone that the lead facilitator was holding, and he handed it to me and he said, "Well, you're our guest. Why don't you start? I'd like you to start with, if I could speak from the heart, I would say." And
Mhm.
literally, I'm taking that stone from him, and I'm
You're
like,
thinking,
"I
what does that
speak
mean?
from my head, but I don't know what you're talking about, right? I'm a human doer, but okay." And I put that in my hand and I said, "Wow, I think I've lived my life for everyone but me. I'm graduating, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt after giving up my 20s and my youth, and I am so depressed when I should be on top of the world."
Mhm.
And I was waiting for judgment from them. I was waiting for critical looks. I was so fearful, but there was just compassion and everybody just, holding me there. And I realized that I was the person who needed to hear that said out loud, not them.
Mhm.
And
Right.
the only way I had the courage to do it was because I was halfway around the world and I thought no one in my family could hear me or would know.
Mhm.
But the courage was really for me to hear it. So when I came back and I got a job, because listen, my loans are kicking in, like life is still happening.
Mhm.
I got a job and I moved to California and I started being a hospitalist where you take care of heart attacks, strokes, pneumonias, an equally intense job. And I burned out 3 years in. One day I walked in and I told you about that people pleasing. I became really good at taking care of other people. Well, I walk in, I have 18 hospitalized patients, and someone says, hey, someone's called in sick. Can you take the pager that takes all incoming transfers? And I say, sure. I didn't even think about it. Like, what about my 18 patient load?
It's programmed into you. I got yes programmed into me too. It's hard to unprogram that.
Yeah. And so I said yes. And about 5 hours later, I turned to the nurse and I said, hey, Nina, could you please get me 40 mil equivalents of IV potassium for the gentleman in 636? And she looked at me and said, Dr. Sangwan, are you okay? And I said, yeah, why? And she said, that's the fourth time you've asked me that question in under 5 minutes, and I've answered you every time.
Wow.
And that was my meeting burnout. I was so tuned out of my body. I pushed through my body. I did not partner with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had learned that that's what would give me love in the world. That's what would give me accolades. That's how people would be impressed by me.
I'm curious, Neha. So for those who are listening who are like, gosh, I think I'm burned out, but I don't really know. Because what does it feel like? Like, what are the symptoms? What did that feel like? What were the symptoms? I mean, obviously memory issues could be part of it, but what else was happening?
Sure. Well, I'm going to say it depends at what level you pick it up. You know, when I read your history about being a Navy SEAL, like, how do you become a Navy SEAL? You become a Navy SEAL because you tune out of your body and you tune into the danger of the world and you do whatever it takes to get it done. Right? There's a team aspect there, but there's a pushing through your body, not partnering with it. You're not going to worry about biologically what you need. You're going to go for the mission, right? Yeah. And so what I'd say is let's first explain what burnout is. It's a triad. There's exhaustion, physical exhaustion, emotional exhaustion too, but the word is exhaustion. Then that goes on for a while and you adapt. Mother Nature has given you lots of ways in your physiology to adapt. You start having a cup of coffee in the morning, and then you walk in, you say, make it a double. You start adjusting. Maybe for you, it's a glass of wine after work to take the edge off. And then suddenly during COVID, it was like, can you hand me the bottle? Right? Whatever it is, we all have these strategies.
Guilty.
Where we have a deadline that we need to get over, but our body is lagging. We have these ways that we start overriding those mechanisms. So I call those coping mechanisms. The first thing is you got to know how your body talks to you. Your body has a unique language. It's talking to you. The question is, are you listening? So what I mean by that is my body had been constricting I had throat constriction and my stomach was turning every time I was being asked to do something that was outside my comfort zone. But I figured out 2 ice cold 16-ounce Mountain Dews plus a king-size Snickers bar, and you could get me through a 36-hour shift without sleep.
Oh, my God.
But don't we adapt?
Painful to hear that, but yeah, I see that so often, right? We do. Yeah.
So I want to start by saying, all of you out there, what's the unique, time-tested strategy that when you've got to get through something, but you're too exhausted to do it, that you know? Do you reach for something? Is it sugar and caffeine? Is it retail therapy? Is it surfing the web to kind of zone out for a bit? What is it that gets you back to where you need to do exercise it off strategy? I don't know what snooze it off strategy, 20 minutes and you'll be back on the game. Whatever it is, just know what that is. Second thing I'd say, so now you got to know how your body talks to you. Do you know how your body talks to you when you get out of your comfort zone? Like mine's throat constriction, stomach turning. Sometimes it's heart racing, sweating, jaw, shoulder.
My body gives me the sensation that I'm bored and I just start to fidget.
So you start seeing the repetitive nature of moving
And I have I went through 58 and a half years thinking that I didn't have any kind of like alphabet soup, labels. And I went to Dr. Amen, you're familiar with him, the brain science guy, and he did a full workup and he just had a big smile on his face when I did the after debriefing. He goes, Mark, you've got ADD. I'm like, what? I'm a Navy SEAL. I can concentrate like a mother, He goes, yeah, but you got ADD. I'm like, man, that explains a lot, actually.
Yeah.
But I think ADD to me is just a label for a blueprint, the body, like you said, the body is responding based upon, for me, the level of trauma that was happening in my household. There was a lot of anger and rage from my father and and so it wasn't safe. And so I had to be busy or
vigilant.
Away from that. Vigilant.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh my gosh. So let's get back to the triad of burnout. So the first part is exhaustion. So it's physical and mental, emotional exhaustion. It's been going on for a while and you've been adjusting to that over time.
To
then
compensate.
All of a sudden, Yeah, the second one comes in, which is subtle, and you might not even notice it, but it's almost like when you're walking on the beach and you get the undercurrent where you can feel it, but you can't see it.
Mm-hmm.
It's when your mind starts saying things like, "It doesn't really matter how hard I try, it's not going to make a difference." And it starts
Mm-hmm.
undermine. So you're already
Defeatism,
exhausted,
right?
but you're willing to get through the exhaustion if you think something can be changed. But
Mm-hmm.
cynicism creeps in, and
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden now you're undermining yourself. Now, another thing that happens here is I might be lonely. I might need connection. I might want to be with other people, but I start depersonalizing myself, distancing myself because I don't have the energy for social connection. And
Mm-hmm.
then the third piece is ineffectiveness. Literally that day, I hit a wall. Like, thank goodness the nurse let me know what was happening because I could have written the wrong dose of a medication. I could have written the wrong medication. I could have done something much worse. But here's the thing. Oftentimes we don't realize it ourselves, and we need to be open to other people's care when they say to us, "Hey, Mark, are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
Are you
Right.
doing okay?" They're not trying to tell us something's wrong or shame us or any of that. They're actually often the first time we recognize it. So, exhaustion, cynicism, and ineffectiveness is the triad. You aren't fine on Monday and you're burned out by Friday. This is something that's been going on for months and years, sometimes decades before people notice it. So it takes time. And there's three phases also. So you start and there's the alarm phase. Maybe you're in a new
Mm-hmm.
situation, a new relationship. A lot of change has happened. It's called the alarm phase. It's kind of like jumping on a treadmill that's going a little too fast.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like heart racing, you're a little irritable. You might have stomach discomfort. You might have, you're not sleeping well. So first of all, I'd say anytime some of those things happen, please go check out with your doctor and make sure there's not something physically wrong with you. But if you get a
Mm-hmm.
clean bill of health, but you're not okay yourself, you're like, well, they said I'm fine, but I don't feel fine. Then you want to think about, could I be burning out? And
Mm-hmm.
it would be like irritability, you're defensive, you're snapping at people when you don't normally do that. You're missing deadlines when that's not you. You're staying late at work, you're coming in late, things that just aren't you. Your behavior starts changing a little bit. And other people might be the ones, and this is where you want to be kind to them. They might be saying that to you. Like, "Hey, Mark, you're always on time. Like, you're coming in 5 minutes late. Like, what's going on?" That's early. That's the alarm phase.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that goes on and people never get off that treadmill going too fast and they start doing the Mountain Dew and making it a double at the coffee shop and wine, and they start using these coping mechanisms, they move into the second phase, which is chronic adaptation, where now you're just
Mm-hmm.
hanging on
Mm-hmm.
and you're needing more and more and more of these coping mechanisms.
Right.
And then I think that's when COVID hit. I think our world was really at chronic adaptation. And then the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic hit and we went sliding down the slippery slope of burnout to ineffectiveness. And that's called the exhaustion phase, where
Mm-hmm.
you literally can't
Yeah.
function. You need time off, you need medications, you need help. And the way you're at the end of the chronic adaptation phase, you start to move to the I don't care.
You
You're
don't give a
apathy.
yeah,
You
yeah,
you start not to care
defeatist.
anymore. Yeah.
Fascinating. I love how you laid that out because obviously we want to catch it, at the first phase, and interrupt it, interdict it, and
And
begin
course correct.
the yeah, course correct, the positive, interceptions instead of those chronic adaptations of the coffee and the alcohol and the sugar.
Yeah. I don't think there's anyone who can't know this now because we're living in a
Mm-hmm.
world that we have all co-created
Mm-hmm.
that says things like faster is better, do more with less each year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every year starts with how can we cut budget, do more with less, make more
Right.
profit, right?
Right.
And if we're going to keep doing this eternally, who's going to take into account our own biology?
Mm-hmm.
Because our
Right.
biology thrives on exertion and rest. It thrives on feedback loops for our hormonal system, for our immune
Right.
system. We digest and then we rest. Like everything
Mm-hmm.
needs to be in cycles. But when
Mm-hmm.
we think faster is better, and all of us want to belong and get the, medals and the achievements in a world that says, no, faster is better, pedal to the metal, just keep going. At some point, now we're into AI.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, this is going to outpace our biology.
You
And I
simply
think
can't.
that's a
You
lot.
simply can't
Yeah,
keep
we
up.
can't keep up. The biggest example of this is We used to wake up and see if we felt well rested. Now we look at a readiness score to see how we slept. We don't really check in with our own body,
Right.
right? And so that's like a sign of the times. We depend on something else to tell us how we are
Right. I totally
versus
agree.
us
That's
knowing it.
that's that's why I don't wear wearables, because I think that they're helpful if you need an intervention, but ultimately you need to learn to listen to your body, and it's much more
Yeah.
effective.
And an
So
and in the end is an and is good, you know?
and that's good, yeah, or better, right? Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of inaccuracies in that, and they can steer you down the wrong path. You know what you're describing is the whole Western model, which has its positive aspects, right? The
Sure.
the scientific method, brilliant, right? Very helpful, even though
For
it can get
crisis.
corrupt. It can get corrupted, especially for crisis, but also for building, right?
Yeah.
Look at the beautiful, the Western model has built great engineering projects. Feats sent
Yeah.
people to Mars, or will soon send people to Mars, and maybe populate the galaxy. That's all that kind of Western scientific materialism, accomplishment, doing, and even winning. It has a motivating factor for that, but it's half
Sure.
the equation, right? Like you
That's right.
described it, it's only half. In related to burnout, if all you are is have do mode, and you think that you are the cause of all your accomplishments, and so in order to achieve more, you've got to do more. Well, that's a broken model, right? That is not
Yep.
true. You have to take time on the opposite side, which is the recovery and the beingness. So doing versus being.
Yep.
Eastern cultures have much more relationship with being. Meditation coming out of the Indian and Tibetan cultures, and spreading through the East into China and Japan, and so meditation, contemplation, that whole the way you described your family, that's that family that can just sit and receive, as opposed to like Western model is like, you get out of the house at 21 and go,
Yeah.
or 18, and go find a job or whatever.
Yeah, there's a
It's
sacredness to this, to the family network, to the social
right.
connections. There's a
That's part of the
richness.
beingness, though, I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. And I think at some point, I don't know if you feel this, I've started to feel this in my career, that burnout was my wake up. People think it's a failure. Burnout is not at
No.
all a failure. It's not at all a personal failure. What it is your world. It's a wake up call. It's a wake up
Right.
call telling you that the strategies and coping mechanisms you've used until now, it's time for new ones, and you've
That's right.
outgrown them. And now
That's right.
it's time to go deeper. And what I'd say that this has really helped me to do is move from accomplishment to fulfillment.
Right. You use a metaphor of, getting a rocket through the atmosphere. It takes an enormous amount of effort, right?
Yeah.
And that's akin to like the building phase of your career. For you getting
Yeah.
your doctor degree and all that work, right, was
Yeah.
enormous. And that got you out of the lower Earth atmosphere,
That's
so to
right.
speak.
That's right.
But it wasn't going to get you where you needed to go, because, that first
No.
stage of your rocket was completely spent. So you needed to take time to recharge and refuel and set course for your
Yeah.
next destination in a more balanced fashion. So I agree with you. The
Yeah.
burnout is a gift. It tells you that
Yeah. And we've
you're now
created
at a
a
place.
world. Well,
Right.
we've created a world that doesn't coexist with our own biology. That's what we're creating. When we really believe that faster is better and profit over people and all of these things, what we're doing is we're literally saying we are not in the equation,
Right.
right?
I like that. Yeah.
24/7, people are expected to be on, all of these ways that we're moving. And I'm really thinking that the only way we can move forward in an effective way is by, I'm going to get a little woo woo here, but up leveling our consciousness so that we're
Mm-hmm.
operating at, like, upgrading the human software
Mm-hmm.
so that we can function in the world we have created.
Mm-hmm. Hey, maybe you like a pair of good jeans like I do. I love a good pair of jeans, especially when they're warm out and they fit like a glove, but it's tough to find them, and they're super uncomfortable until they do. And oftentimes by the time they fit like a glove, they don't look so great. That's why I'm super stoked to find DUER, DUER jeans, and to have them as a sponsor for the Mark Divine Show. DUER jeans are incredible. They fit extremely well. These are made for everyday living, all sorts of things you can do with these jeans. They're extremely comfortable as well, right out of the box. And you can wear them for almost any occasions. They dress up or down. I use them to go out for dinner, and I also train in them. They're that comfortable. They're not your typical jeans. Their denim features 360-degree stretch, made from technical fibers that keep you cool and dry, and they're sustainably made with, believe it or not, plant-based materials. So check them out at their flagship store, either in LA or Denver, or shopdoer.com, and use my URL, shopdoer.com/divine, DIVINE, to get 20% off your first order. Again, shopdoer, that's SHOPDUER.com/divine. Go there, check it out. Get 20% off your first order. You're going to love these jeans. They're the most desired jeans now in the country. I love them, and I know you will too. I totally agree with that. That's not woo-woo to me. I use those terms almost every day. So I agree with you. You know, you can't change things from the paradigm that created them, the paradigm that created burnout, right? If you think that just taking a break, getting some rest, and then going right back into that system is the answer until you hit burnout again, and then you take another break. No, that's not changing the consciousness level. Yeah. So you need to take a break and begin a process of deep introspection and gaining some clarity as to why that happened, and then like what's next and how you can get there. At a higher level of consciousness, to achieve the same things that you did in the past requires much less work.
Yep.
Right?
That's right. Because that's the resourcefulness.
Right. Because you're able to tap into a more deeper wellspring of creativity and potential.
Yeah.
And so
100%.
if you take that time and, you know, rebalance, whether you are experiencing the early stage or late stage of burnout or not burnout at all, but you see it potentially coming, you know, the answer isn't to fret it or fear it, but to just build into your day a mechanism for that beingness to just be. And so, you know, what that looks like.
Counterintuitive.
It's very counterintuitive because it's absolutely against everything we've been trained, but it's absolutely essential for us to navigate at the level we're talking about, where AI is, you know, 100 billion times faster processing. And so we're not going to we don't think that way. We're not going to think that way. So we partner with AI, but AI can't have the creativity, doesn't have the raw power of a human being that comes from source, you know, flowing through or outpouring through us. But you shut that off when you operate strictly from your head in achievement mode. So you've got to take the time every morning, and I say every morning and evening to my community, every morning and evening, minimum 20 minutes, just take the time to just sit, breathe, turn your attention inward, and start to, you know, release all that need to be somebody special. And it's the taming of the ego. This is where humble leadership comes from too. That's amazing.
I just got back from India, and I tell you that I have a hard time sitting still for 20 minutes. And so what I've figured out is that active meditation really works for me, where I'm chanting, and it feels like an inner massage.
I love that. Yeah, sound is really powerful, right?
Yeah, like the vibration, I'm breathing, it's in like a repetitive space. And that's what I would encourage people. You know, if just sitting, you're like, oh gosh, that gets me antsy. Like I can't do that. There's other ways, you know, you can focus. There's focused meditation where you can just be looking at a flame or a light where you can focus. There's active meditation where you're chanting. There's shaking and dancing where you're just allowing your body to move in ways that it normally doesn't. Perhaps for you, it's a run, you know, or whatever it is, but whatever gets you into that Zen space within you is really what we're talking about, because that's where insights flow. That's where you connect to your intuition. That's where you start to get messages, ahas, insights. And then there's also really practical ways, you know, practical tools that can do it too. And I think when, you know, in burnout, what I found out was people get exhausted and depleted for different reasons.
Right.
And so where you are from burned out to fully charged at work and in life is, I believe, whether you have a net gain or a net drain of energy on a physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual level.
Love that.
And so you got to figure out what unique path you took there. During the pandemic, it might have been a social energy drain. Now it may be physical and emotional. I don't know. So it can change over time. And the way that I do it, I created a questionnaire, which I'm happy to give your group. When I was touring with the book, anyone that came live, I would give this questionnaire and this little mini series of me walking you through it. But basically, You got to use more than your brain to answer the question. So in the physical level, I'll ask you, like, how satisfied are you with your food, energy, sleep, and movement? Okay, so they give themselves a score of 1 to 10. And then I say, anything that wasn't a 10, tell me what would make it a 10. And the whole time you're filling out the physical section, it's not just up here in your head. It's about paying attention to where in your body you're feeling constriction, tightness, heaviness, or openness, relaxation, ease, lightness. We have to start training people to use not just their mind, but their mind in partnership with their body.
Right.
To come up with the answer. So if I say 6 hours of sleep is enough, it's enough. I'm putting a 10 on there. But I check in with my body and my body feels heavy and depleted. The answer is net drain, right? Because we have to take into, so it's about that partnership. And same thing, like mentally, right? When something goes wrong or you didn't expect it or you were surprised, do you make it about yourself? Do you blame it on someone else? Or do you try to make it about something bigger than you or them so that nobody's blamed? The reality is that on a mental level, pretty much all three of those are true. There's some part of it that was yours, there's some part of it that was someone else's, and there's something in the circumstances that caused it to happen. And so there's all these ways that we can start to figure out where we're having net gains and drains of energy. And once you have this awareness, you know where to focus. And I think that's one of the biggest problems of us feeling overwhelmed in the world and this pace of change is not knowing exactly where we're having a net drain. So
Right. It's you got to have a starting point, right?
Yeah.
A place to point your arrow.
So I'll give you that link. You can put it in the show notes.
That's awesome. Maybe this is what you were just talking about, but what's the relationship between spiritual energy and burnout?
Great question. Well, why don't I just finish them then? I give you an example of physical. I give you an example of mental. So this is the question I ask in emotional, which is, I can figure this out pretty fast if you're having an emotional drain. I say, tell me where in your life you're avoiding conflict, right? Or experiencing difficult emotions. And I say, work, home, finances, social life, like what is it? And then I flip it and I say, what areas of your life are giving you joy? And so all of a sudden you can see like, oh, wow, net drain, net gain, right? And as you're filling it out, then in the social arena, it's a really simple question, which is write down the top 5 people or groups of people that you spend time with online or in person. And as you're writing down their names, pay attention to your body as to whether that name, just like on caller ID, if it ever comes up, right? In the old days on our phone,
you recoil
you would know
from it,
whether
or do you get excited?
Do you get excited, or are you like, go to voicemail, right? Like, no. So pay attention as you write down those 5 names or groups of people and see whether you're having a net drain or net gain. And then look at that, check in with your body. And then for social energy, tell me if you're having a net gain or a net drain. And spiritual. So this one's really important. People say, why do you talk about spiritual energy in a business book? And I say, because it's the most important energy driving everything else. Spiritual energy is about what matters most to you. It's about your highest values. It's about how much you trust yourself to move into the unknown, to handle change, to be courageous and take the steps you need to when you've never been there before. Right? So it's about self-trust. It's also about your purpose, feeling valued and appreciated at home and at work, and also whether something has meaning to you and purpose. Do you get up every day, expend all this energy and time because every 2 weeks you want a paycheck to hit your account? Well, after a while, no matter how many zeros are in that paycheck, it's going to feel draining. And so the questions I ask in the spiritual section are along the lines of this. So let's start with the values, right? Tell me about a time when you felt deeply valued and appreciated. Because if you tell someone that story, your highest values are going to be illuminated quite quickly. Then the self-trust one, this is about where in your life, and why don't you and I do this?
Sure.
Where in your life are you willing to take risks? So for me, I'd say mentally, emotionally, socially, spiritually, entrepreneurially, and financially, I take risks. Wrote books, had to invest in that, right? A lot of that. But where I don't take risks is like physical high adventure sports. And up until a few years ago, romantically, I did not take risks. And so if I tell you where I take risks and where I don't take risks, you now know where I trust myself and where I don't.
Mm-hmm.
So what about you? Where do you take risks and where don't you take as many risks?
Wow. I'm a big risk taker. So obviously physical challenges high on the list, mental challenges. After a 20 some odd year delay, I'm back finishing my PhD. So maybe,
Oh,
if you had asked me that
wow.
5 years ago, I'd been like, yeah, I'm not taking risks in the scholarly department because I had
Yeah,
some
like
resistance.
academics.
Yeah, there was some resistance to that when I was, the way I was brought up, even though, that hyperachievement brought straight A's in high school. But when I got to college, I'm like, I had serious doubt about my abilities
Mm.
and a lot of low self-esteem around my academic because I didn't know how to study or believe in myself compared to all
Yep.
these other incredibly bright students. So that
And what is
lingered
your
with me.
PhD in? Do you mind
Global
telling?
leadership and change.
Wow.
Why
Thank
not?
you.
Because that,
Yeah.
we need a little of that, right? I married a therapist at 30. Life changed. Life was different. It took time. Before then, I would not risk with any type of intimacy,
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability. This is
Mm-hmm.
not uncommon with men, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I knew if I didn't go there, the marriage wouldn't have lasted. And so I've become very, very risk, not avoidant, but risk prone with the
Yeah.
relationship, especially, with my wife and my family. Right. So it's
Incredible.
different,
That is incredible. But
incredibly
see, you
different
can see
approach.
where you started to trust yourself.
Right.
And here's the thing, you know where I will take physical risks? If
Mhm.
someone like you said they would do it with me.
Yes. Well, yeah,
So
I love that.
if
A
if
teammate,
I can
right?
get social connection and I trust you, I can find the trust in me.
Hmm.
You know that trip to Australia I told you about?
Hmm.
I was afraid of heights and afraid of deep water. And
Hmm.
on that trip, I found people I really trusted, and I climbed the Sydney Harbor Bridge, which wasn't scary at all. I thought it was going to be terrifying. And then I went to the Great Barrier Reef, and I attached myself to this poor guy's arm. I mean, I really did, but I did go 30 feet underwater, which
Sweet.
was probably one of the most surreal experiences I've ever had. So there's almost like when I don't trust myself, you got to figure out how you know or how
Right.
you can trust yourself, right? So
Right.
then there's the question around whether you feel appreciated at work or at home.
Hmm.
And what I want people to know is that there's different ways each of us feels appreciated. And it's like verbal affirmation or written or verbal affirmation. And you'll know in a work setting whether you like that in front of a whole room of people or you'd like it in a private meeting, right? But
Hmm.
verbal affirmation. The second one is around quality time, that we
Hmm.
just get to spend quality time together. This is Gary Chapman's 5 love languages, actually, is where
Hmm.
this comes from.
Remember that?
The
Yeah.
third one is gifts. That can be a promotion, money, bonuses, title, whatever they can be monetary or non-monetary. Your child can give you a flower that they picked, but it's a gift. Fourth is acts of service. My dad did this for me since I was a little girl. Every morning I woke up to hot chai, and it was just our little tradition. And then fifth is physical touch, not necessarily intimate sex,
Hmm.
but it's more about like when I would say to a patient, I'm giving them a diagnosis of cancer, I would put my hand on their
Oh, yeah.
forearm,
So
right?
important. Yeah.
Or you say good job and you touch someone on the shoulder,
Hmm.
right? The problem is that a lot of times we have certain ways that we feel more appreciated and other people are giving us in another way.
Hmm.
And so we don't feel appreciated. And then the
Hmm.
last one, of course, in spiritual is purpose and meaning, which is really, really important.
Yeah. What rings true for me with the spiritual energy is that it's heart energy, right?
Yeah.
When I use the language of courage wolf, I'm really telling people that, if you're in your head, you are feeding fear
Yeah.
because it's the ego. The heart energy is said from, your Indian culture to be where the center of spiritual energy,
Mhm.
lives, resides, flows through, whatever.
Yep.
There's no ego there, right? There is no conceptualization. It is non-dual, pure Satchit Ananda, being,
Mhm.
intelligence, and bliss. And so when you consciously are able to connect with your heart, that's courage, right? And cour
Yeah.
means heart in French.
Yep.
And so it is also the energy that informs you when you pay attention of what your purpose is, what your calling or dharma, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why you say, well, what does purpose have to do with spirit? Well, it's related because there's, kind of the non-personal universal, and then the individualized spirit that has a reason for incarnating, and it was a choice at a
Yeah.
at a
Yeah.
certain level that is beyond your conscious awareness right now, but it's there. It's in the energy of your very being, and it's in your heart.
Yeah.
And so if you don't take the time to connect to your heart and sit in silence, we call it sacred silence, you might miss it. And this is a big cause of suffering for a lot of people, to go through their entire life and think, well, I missed it, right? I don't really know what my calling was.
Yeah. And I think those are paying attention. It's almost the balance, Mark, between us paying attention to our inner world as we navigate the outer world.
That's right.
And I say
they're really not separate, right? That's the ultimate
not
teaching.
separate.
They're not separate. They co-arise.
They do. And in the end, what I say to people is, when you have to make a difficult decision, my wish for you is that you can hear the sound of your own heart slightly louder than you can hear the voices of others.
I love that.
You and I, we've met each other a couple times as we were trying to make this happen, right? But I can already tell it's what I call a sacred exchange.
Mm-hmm.
We just get to show up as who we are. We get to bounce off each other. We get to adjust and be in the world. And to me, that authenticity, that ability to go deep, quick, and trust ourselves and trust each other and trust anyone who's listening to be in on the conversation with it all, to me, that's a sacred exchange.
Yeah, I agree. And I believe that these are the type of conversations that will lead humanity to a very beautiful future. Yeah. My friend Charles Eisenstein, he's a poet and an author, uses the term, the more beautiful future our hearts knows is possible.
I love that.
Because all the negativity and violence, it's all head stuff. It's all ego, and it's all trained and conditioned in the cultures of our society through the media and through the political structures. And so part of waking up, as a human being, is to recognize that you have been, if you're a victim of anything, you're a victim of that. It's not your fault. It's just the way you are trained. And if you're not training yourself, someone else is training you, the results will speak for themselves. So take your power back. And how do you do that? First, you got to avoid burnout. Taking your power back is everything you just described about burnout, right? Because that ultimately living that model of that Western mindset of consumerism and kind of like negativity, right? And violence, it will lead to burnout, ultimately to disease and untimely.
Yeah. And you have to know yourself. It really does start with deciphering the unique language of your body. And you got to start getting the signals internally. You know what I do is when people say, I don't know what you're talking about, I don't get any signals. Mm-hmm. I say to them, just take like a AirPod case, take a stone that's smooth, and in your next meetings, just hold on to that. And when something surprises you, something changes in the direction of the meeting, check in, because that's usually when your body starts talking to let you know that something's changing. And if you can't feel anything, say to yourself, I can feel this in my hand. And what we'll do is we'll take the external world and we'll start using what you're really good at tuning into to help you tune into your internal world. So when I was working with oncologists, the cancer doctors, they were the ones that I found were the most tuned out of their body out of all the people that I worked with. Because every day, every patient that comes to them has the potential of leaving them. Right? And so they need to brace themselves and guard themselves. And we did this in about 4 weeks into our workshop and our experience. They started feeling, and they were like, wow, I think I have just guarded myself. So if you're one of those people out there, what I want you to know is there's just really practical, easy ways that you can start tuning in, and the stillness is really important to start.
So your book is Powered by Me, From Burned Out to Fully Charged at Work and in Life. So the listeners who inspired, they can, buy the book, but like, if someone is listening to this and being like, oh my God, this is the conversation I needed to hear because I'm in crisis, what would you say to them? Is there like a do this, and do this, and then get the book and, read it and breathe, or like how do we help someone who's in crisis today?
You bet. Well, first of all, I don't want you reading a 300-page book if you're in crisis.
Right.
So on page 20, what I say is, if you just learned what burnout is and you didn't know what it was, and you just realize you're either in chronic adaptation or exhaustion and you need help, I give them a link, which we can put in there. It's called the Emergency Toolkit, but it's intuitiveintelligenceinc.com/PBM resources, powered by me resources, where they can get an immediate way to ground them in their breath, in guided imageries, practical tools that can settle them down right now.
Mm-hmm.
But you're exactly right. If they're in crisis, the first thing they need to do is get help from a health professional, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mental health, physical health. Now, if they're at work, they need to see their EAP, which is Employee Assistance Program, which will send them to a doctor who will write them for time off, where they
Mm-hmm.
get 60%, usually something like that. It differs by state, but pay while they're on leave. So
Mm-hmm.
now what we've done is we've stopped the bullet train from moving in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
When they see a doctor, they'll get that time off. And then depending what they tell the doctor, when I'm listening to someone, I want to know, are you sleeping at night? Because if you're not sleeping at night, you're not recovering.
Right.
I'll give you something for sleep. Are you anxious chronically and you can't stop with your mind then maybe I'll give you something for anti-anxiety and or depression. Maybe there's some way that you feel stuck and I need to help you there. So I'm listening for what can help shift someone back into their normal physiology. Okay. Now here's the problem. If I give you 10 days or a month off, this is the gap. I'm going to send you back in a month later. I say I'm going to send you back into the ring for round 2 is what I normally say.
Yeah.
But I'm going to send you back in the ring for round 2 with no idea of the underlying patterns that got you there or
Right.
what to do differently.
Yeah,
And
that was
that's
just a
where-
crisis intervention to stop the
That
train.
was.
And now you've got to develop new habits and
That's right.
modalities for health.
That's right. And that's what I wrote in Powered by Me. It's my 20-year journey of figuring that out myself and then helping tens of thousands of people do it and figuring out how do we give them those practical and powerful tools so they can figure out what is uniquely theirs and how can they lift their consciousness, become more resourceful,
Right.
and be ready to go back in and do it differently.
Amazing. What's next for you as we wrap up here?
Well, exhaling from a book launch, you know this.
I know.
It's a big
Yeah,
it's
now
a big
your time
deal.
to recover.
Yes. And I want to say that the delight has been meeting people like you, just
Mhm.
all these fellow souls on the journey that I didn't even know existed,
Mhm.
and realizing that maybe I can have more hope because there's so much going on that I don't know about so lifting my spirits. What I'm moving into really is I run Conscious Business Leadership Academy, which is, we've done it in the past for CEOs or executives, 6-month consciousness journey. I do it with my partner, Raj Sisodia.
I would love to participate in that, by the way. That'd be fun.
Yeah,
That'd be
we'd
enjoyable.
love that. And so we do that. But now what I'm doing is I'm expanding this burnout and wellness. I don't think the world understands how to truly heal emotional and mental health, truly give people the common language to bridge generations, across these 5 generations that we've got in our workforce. And I don't think they know how to onboard Gen Z. So I'm creating something
Agreed.
called Bridging Me We World, which is going to be a company-wide wellness program, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, from CEO to new hire, where everybody learns these tools together.
Nice.
So I think we got to build trust, truth, transparency, and transformation one company at a time. We don't have time for this to go to just leaders,
I agree with that.
right? We got to give everybody these tools because then our company is stronger if everyone can navigate change quickly.
I totally agree. That aligns with kind of my movement to work more with organizations to develop conscious growth cultures.
Yeah.
Which is, like you said, it's not like top-down leaders, directing leadership development. That's all horizontal development of the past. But my dissertation with my PhD is going to be on vertical development of teams, because everything is done with teams. We say that team is the new leader, and
That's
teams
right.
that grow together accomplish great success together without the old linear issues of burnout and just
Wow.
putting points on the board.
Well, I
So
would
we're-
love to talk to you outside of all of this. And I think there's, the old model is one leader has 10 or 15 people that they're leading, and they need to know all of their preferences, desires, career path, all of that. I think the new model is 10 or 15 people need to know one person, and it's themselves.
That's right.
And their job is to communicate so that the leader can help them do this. But I think we've had the model upside down. What I really want to do is show that when we do this type of team building and company wellness to solve these issues, it dramatically reduces their healthcare costs.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It'd be great to get some metrics on that quickly.
You bet.
So love to look forward to following up on that. Neha, thank you so much. So the book, we put the title out, Powered by Me, From Burned Out to Fully Charged at Work and Life. Where do you like people to reach out to you personally, social media or otherwise?
So that would be Intuitive Intelligence Inc., INC at the end.com. And my personal website's nehasangwan.com. Either of those will work, and we'd be happy to hear from you. And then on social, I'm on LinkedIn, it's Neha Sangwan, MD. And on all the other areas, you spell out the word doctor at DOCTORNEHA.
Dr. Neha Sangwan.
You got it.
Thing. Got it.
No, just my first name, Dr. Neha.
Dr. Neha.
I don't like people calling me Dr. Sangwan. I'd much rather that it was more personal. I feel like it's such an intimate exchange. You're naked, in a paper thin gown, and I'm in a white coat and a, fancy thing. And it's like, Dr. Sangwan. And I'm like, yeah, Mark, what can I do for you? Right. So I've always said to everybody, like, please call me Neha, or they wouldn't do that. The nurses wouldn't do that. So I got them to finally say, okay, Dr. Neha. So that's what we use.
That's awesome. Hey, everyone, this is Mark Devine, founder of SEALFIT and Unbeatable Mind. And I'm super stoked to announce that my new book, Uncommon, is due out from St. Martin's Press this summer, July 16th. And we've launched a pre-order campaign. You can learn more about that at readuncommon.com to try to get early awareness for the book, which I hope will help a lot of people, where I go and do a deep dive on the 5 mountains of personal mastery: physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, and spiritual. Uncommon, simple principles for an extraordinary life. Check it out at readuncommon.com, and thank you for your support and being part of the change that you want to see in this world. Hoo-yah, Divine out. Well, Dr. Neha, thank you so much for your time and your presence, incredible conversation, and for the work that you're doing. And I look forward to many more conversations in the future.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome. Hoo-yah.